The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
If science and religion are both searching for the truth, shouldn't they in the long run come up with the same answers? Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our guest today is Archit Goel, a scientist, mathematician who lives in Mumbai, India, with his wife and son. Along with his understanding of physics, he has studied the teachings of the mystic Paramahansa Yogananda and is familiar with Sanskrit and the 5,000-year-old Indian texts known as the Upanishads. In his presentation at this year's IANDS conference, he interpreted scientifically the observations in an NDE and provided insight into the nature of consciousness. Archit argues that one should be able to reach a single truth via suitable analysis of different phenomenon, removing the conflict between science, math, and spirituality. Archit, welcome to NDE Radio.
Yeah, hi, Lee. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I'm glad to have you. Archit, how did you first get interested in near-death experience?
Well, I was always interested in different kind of things. I was studying physics, I was studying music, etc. Near-death experience happened 4 years back after the death of my father. And, I was in a state of shock. I was searching for where he has gone and how is he. And then my sister told me there's this NDE, concept of NDE and IANDS, and that's when I saw the website. And I was moved by thousands of accounts over here, and they all pointed to the same story. That's how I got interested.
Very good. Well, tell us how you hope to reconcile the spiritual and the scientific understandings of NDEs.
Yes, so what I found out as I gradually studied more and more about NDEs is that there's no conflict at all between what one experiences in an NDE, what is written in the ancient scriptures about the nature of consciousness, and what is there in science. And it's just that we have to, interpret it in the correct manner, but there's absolutely no conflict between all three. They all point to the same thing.
Now, in your lecture, you discussed muons, and maybe you could tell a little about how they tell us something about the variability of time and space.
Yes. So the example of muons is very interesting, and the fastest way, to lead us towards an understanding of what an NDE is and what consciousness is. And it all, comes from Einstein's theory of special relativity, and muons validate that. So I'll tell you a bit about that. Muons are elementary particles which are formed 10,000 meters above the surface of the Earth when cosmic rays collide with the upper atmosphere. And they are unstable particles having a life of 2.2 microseconds. Right? So at nearly the speed of light at which they travel, they can travel only 660 meters in 2.2 microseconds. Yet we find muons traveling 10,000 meters, and they are observed at the surface of the Earth. Now, how does that happen? They should disintegrate long before they reach the Earth. It happens because of special relativity effects. From muons' perspective, the distance is not 10,000 meters. The distance is only about 660 meters. And there's the effect of length contraction. So we see, this relativity in action. For us, something is 10,000 meters. For muons, it shrinks down to 660 meters. Yet they are able to physically access all the distance and travel to Earth. A similar thing happens with time. There's time dilation. for us, something which is 2.2 microseconds is very different from Neon's perspective. If we just use Einstein's formulae and equate the same phenomena with light, then we find that for a moving object like light, all time and all space becomes zero, and for something like us, all time and all space becomes infinity. And that probably, is the indicator of what happens during an NDE in a state of consciousness. We reach a point of singularity, which is related to infinite time and space to our life on Earth. So I think that is a good indicator of how things work in an NDE.
Mm-hmm. So the similarity that the ultimate similarity is the singularity that you're talking about, that all comes together as one.
Yes, it all comes to a single point, and time and space become an illusion because there's no thing such as absolute time and absolute space. Is just relative to each other, and it can vary as per different perspectives, and this has been proved again and again by various experiments exploring special relativity.
One of those experiments, I guess, is that splitting of light into particles and waves.
Yes. So when we speak of quantum physics, things become very interesting because there is absolutely no explanation of how things work, but they are observable and the experiments are repeatable and they are getting practical applications also, but nobody knows how it works. So in the double slit experiment, what happens is that light has the default property of a wave. So just like you put a stone into water, you see ripples which are waves, and light behaves in a similar manner, passes through a single photon of light, behaves like a wave and passes through both the slits at the same time and creates an interference pattern because it interferes with itself after passing through the slit. Right?
Go ahead.
Yeah, but if you try to observe, you place a particle detector near one of the slits, light changes its behavior and becomes a particle and passes through only one of the slits in a random manner. So we see experimentally in action, light behaves like a particle when under observation. It is like a wave when not under observation. And this has happened not only for photons of light. A recent study in the journal Nature shows this phenomena happening for large molecules, also, such as carbon-60 molecules, which are large, huge molecules. We are also made up of carbon. We are made of molecules. If it can happen with C60, it can happen with us also. If we extend this result logically, we can think of it as ours being a state of particle when under observation by ourselves, right? But we die, we lose the identity with body. That observation goes, and we go into a state of wave-like characteristics, which explain, all the phenomena which happen during an NDE.
Mm. In your lecture, you started with a cartoon that I think showed the deceased coming to three gates: eternal bliss, ultimate wisdom, and pepperoni pizza, and they're all lined up for the pizza.
Right.
I had to mention that just not only to break up the intense scientific description you're giving, but also because it was really funny. I wonder, you also mentioned that there's something like 774 NDEs daily in the United States alone. I guess that's estimated based on polls that have been taken. you'd think with that many number of NDEs happening that people would be just so fascinated by it, and yet a lot of people just don't want to talk about it, or religions too also don't want to talk about it, especially the more fundamental Christian sects. One of the things that you've been interested in is Yogananda, and I was wondering if you could talk a little about how his teachings, how you're integrating his teachings into your scientific study.
Yes, so Paramahansa Yogananda and his famous book, Autobiography of a Yogi, that was one of the first books which took us into the secret life of yogis who spend all their time meditating. And what we see over there can be explained in this light, because what he speaks are out-of-body experiences, a person being at multiple places at the same time, and there's a lot of reference to light coming from heaven. And he also speaks about disassociating oneself with his body. One is not aware of his body. He goes into a state of meditation where he goes into a different world. Similar things happen during an NDE. There is also a perspective of how small we are. Right? He says he met a person, a saint, who was meditating for last 45 years or so, and he was fascinated by his knowledge. But the saint said to him that 45 years is nothing in a universe which is billions of years old and infinitely large. So now we know that there are a lot of things we don't know, like the world we know, the universe we know. It's just 5% of the total thing. 95% is dark energy and dark matter, which we don't know anything about. And we just need to be humble. And in true scientific spirit, we need to admit that we don't know a lot of things. And in future, we'll develop that knowledge. But at the moment, we have to be open for a lot of unknown things. And acceptance of NDE should be a part of that.
I think in your lecture you said science is as changeable as the garment industry. I thought that was very funny.
Yes.
So consciousness is the other element here, and I think you said, or maybe I interpreted that consciousness has the property of the light wave, and maybe you could describe that a little bit. Also, the notion that the observer changes that slit experiment is very fascinating to me. Why would human observation change the pattern of the light?
Yes. So ultimately, it seems that it's a conscious universe. Everything is made of consciousness, and consciousness seems to have a property more like a wave rather than matter. And it seems that matter may just be one of the properties of a larger reality, and the property of larger reality may be wave-like rather than matter-like or particle-like. There are several ways by which we can determine this. So, of course, in special relativity, we see it deals with the property of light as a wave, and then the theory is developed and observations from that conform to what we see during NDEs. In double slit experiment also, we see the behavior of light as a wave, default behavior, and the observation aspect we just spoke about. Right? And when not under observation, default behavior is wave, and the properties are similar to NDE. If you look at ancient texts, I'll just refer to one line from a text called Mandukya Upanishad, written in Sanskrit language thousands of years back. There's a line which says, Bhutam bhavat bhavishya iti sarvam omkara eva. And it translates to past, present and future. Everything is this state only, the state of truth, of ultimate reality, of Godhood, and that is described by Omkara. Now, if you interpret that Omkara, Om is said to be the ultimate truth. It is also said to be eternal sound, transcending the universe. Sound is nothing but a wave, but which transcends the universe, has to have a wave-like property, which is not like sound which I'm speaking about. It's just an air disturbance. This has to be something which goes across it. And if it goes across at the sound of light, it has to be, closer to consciousness, which is mentioned over here, which is seen in double slit experiment, which is experienced in NDE, and which is indicated by relativity. So everything, combines. The evidence is pointing towards the wave-like property of the ultimate truth.
Hmm. So is this why some religions practice chanting, like the sound Om, as a way of meditating and focusing themselves?
Yes. So that is the best way to focus their energies, go deep inside, and develop a wave-like characteristic and lose the association with the body and go into a meditative state where they can see the reality, the same reality as is experienced during an NDE.
People who've had NDEs, some of them come back and say that there was beautiful music on the other side, or at least they're interpreting something, a vibration that they felt as music, and so there's a similarity there. And also, in literature, people talk about waves of love, and it's interesting that if the natural state of things is a wave, and the particle is created when we observe, particles are like individuals. I mean, to take it on a macro size way of thinking, if we were all together, we'd be probably in a wave pattern. But as individuals, we insist on being particle patterns instead. So do you think it's fair, or am I stretching it too far to project this into the macro?
I think it's perfectly fine, as long as we believe in the notion of ourselves being matter, of ourselves being this body. We find ourselves as matter and in this body, and it is very difficult to get over this notion because we believe in things we can touch, feel, and see, right? So that association is always there. But the moment a person goes into meditation, or he loses the association with the body by other means, such as having a death or a near-death experience, he sees the other aspect of things, the wave aspect of things, and then everything comes together in a different way, because for a wave like light, time comes to a singularity, to a singular point, and space comes to a singular point, and he is able to relate that to the entire concept of Earth, and that's what happens, probably.
In Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda describes this Kundalini experience. Would you compare that to a near-death experience?
Yes. The same concept is at work in Kundalini experience or in other meditative experience. I mean, there's a lot of energy but these experiences happen when we associate ourselves with the body. Paramahansa Yogananda mentions several times in his book that a person stops breathing or nearly stops breathing, and then he goes into that meditative state, so he doesn't know that he is there in his body, and that is when that is accessible. So same thing happens with Kundalini state probably, and in any other meditative state, which is similar to NDEs.
Have you given any thought to these dark or distressing near-death experiences where people feel isolated and cut off from the light?
Yes, I think that they are done on purpose probably. That is just, my thinking. There's no way to know whether it is true or not. Because even in distressing NDEs, when people are afraid, they lose hope. Eventually, most of the times they do, see the light and find a comfort and joy over there. It may have something to do with the theory of karma, right? So if, someone has done some, dark deeds, he has to realize that, things could have been done differently in love rather than, the other way. And I think that is just a, lesson, and it is ultimately done because of love, so that he can see the brighter picture.
Do you envision, the traditional Western ideas, at least, of heaven and hell? Does karma place you either in one or the other?
I believe in the concept of what we learn in NDE, and NDE speaks only about joy and love as components of the place they go to eventually. So and there's no fear, right? So a person who undergoes NDE loses all fear. He sees no fear in the place where he goes. So I don't think there's such a thing as hell, actually. It's just one place which is full of love and joy. Hell may be maybe a temporary thing created just for a person to learn his lesson, maybe based on his karma, but what I feel is there's only love and joy, and only one place known as heaven.
Then there's the question of time. When people speak of, for instance, communicating with deceased souls on the other side, it's almost as if they can jump into our time period, make observations, and then jump out again into what we would think of as being a timeless space or a timeless place. What have you thought about that at all?
Yes, and if we combine two concepts, one is of science and one of what has been mentioned in ancient texts, I think we can get the answer to this. Now, in science, like we already saw from theory of relativity, right, for something having wave-like feature similar to light, there's a point of singularity, right, which is related to infinite distance and time for a situation such as we are on Earth. So, just like beyond, a smaller distance of 660 meters is related to a larger distance of 10,000 meters on Earth. Similar thing happens for a wave, right? A smaller distance of zero, or close to zero, is related to infinite distance. It's the same formula working for both. So a person in a state of consciousness has access to whatever time and whatever place he chooses to or wants to go to. However, he has access to selective places or selective time, right? Most of the time. And that may come from the concept of ego or the concept of jiva, mentioned in various Sanskrit texts, at least. So a person still has some individuality after he dies, and based on that individuality, which is shaped by his experiences in his lifetime, he still retains that. And one of the theories is the process of reincarnation. Is because of that he comes back to purify himself, to lose his individuality, to lose ego, and then he emerges with the point of singularity as the supreme truth. So this is if we combine the two thoughts, one developed in old times and one developed in new times based on science, we can get some interesting answers to this.
I think my very basic understanding of Einstein's theory of relativity was that nothing moved faster than light, but if you could go faster than light, that time would flow backwards. Do you see that at all suggested in the Upanishad thing about past, present, and future becoming all one?
Yes. So Upanishads mention this concept of time being an illusion. So you can go to the past, you can go to the future also, and people who have experienced LND, for example, Anita Murjani writes in her book that you can not only travel to the past, but you can change your past also. So they got that clarity from the experience of NDE. And Upanishads mentioned that this whole concept of time and space is an illusion. So anything can happen in that. Regarding faster than light, we cannot travel faster than light, but there are even in the scientific realm there are observations where faster than light effects are seen. For example, in quantum entanglement, if a photon is split and there are two parts of a photon in different places, they are able to communicate with each other instantly. And there was a study in Nature saying that this communication happens at least 10,000 times faster than light. And that means, something is coming back from the future. And so it's very interesting, actually. We see a merging of many things. We see a merging of, experience during meditation, merging of experience during NDE, and it is merged with what we observe in scientific observation.
Archit, you're very unusual for a scientist. Most scientists, it seems, are very materialist in their approach to reality. Do you think we would make faster progress in things like quantum if the scientists that are examining the questions were more spiritual?
What I feel is, true spirit of science is observation and exploration, right? So if a scientist stops, looking at his observations, or he stops exploring further, then there is a problem, right? So a scientist has to be, open for the mystic also, because it falls within the purview of what we observe in our daily life. And, science has a tendency to change its mind every now and then, and that is going to happen in the future also. Science is not a very good indicator of absolute truth. In the good old days of Newton and Darwin, everybody was happy. Now we know everything. Then came Einstein with relativity, saying that time and space are not absolute. And by the time we could absorb that, out came the quantum theory, which says we don't know whether we are composed of matter or waves. And after quantum theory, there came the concept of dark energy and dark matter, saying we don't know what 95% of the universe is composed of. And then there's a theory of multiple universes, multiple verses, the string theory, the supersymmetry theory, and whatnot. And these things keep on coming, right? So there's no absoluteness about science, and scientists have to be open to at least observation and be open to the mystic, because everything has not been discovered yet.
Well, Archit, unfortunately, we are just about out of time for today. So let me thank you for sharing your fascinating approach to reconciling faith and science. And I wish you well. And to my listeners, if you would like to listen to the show again or any other of our previous programs, please visit our website at nderadio.org. And for more information about IANDS, please check out that website at IANDS.org. This is Lee Witting for NDE Radio saying thanks for listening.